Half a month after I slapped Emily's male secretary, my officer wife had me sent to military prison. When she finally decided to bring me home, she sent our driver instead of coming herself. The driver returned with unexpected news. The prison guard told him that I had been released 3 days earlier because Colonel Williams had personally come to take me away as a family member. It all started with a single slap. Richard Foster was standing just behind me, still holding the napkin he had used to wipe the cream from the corner of his mouth. Emily didn't ask why I hit Henry. She didn't even look at me. Instead, she stepped protectively in front of him and coldly ordered the security guards to restrain me and call the police. I simply looked at her, smiled, and stopped the recording on my phone. That evening was the 8th anniversary celebration of Foster Group. The hotel's grand ballroom sparkled beneath crystal chandeliers, packed with executives, employees, and business partners. I hadn't even planned to attend. That morning, Emily had sent me a short message. "Tonight is the company's anniversary celebration. Be there and don't dress too poorly." I read the message but never replied. 3 years earlier, when her startup was on the verge of collapse and she couldn't even pay her employees, I mortgaged the 2 houses my mother had left me. I also handed over the prototype of the smart warehousing system I had spent 4 years developing. Back then, she held my hands tightly and promised, "Kane, once Foster Group succeeds, I'll make sure everyone knows you're the reason we made it." The company did become a success. Everyone knew Emily Foster as the brilliant female CEO. No one knew who Kane Miller was. I quietly became the husband who stayed at home, avoided social events, and remained invisible because Emily always said, "You're too quiet. You're not meant to be in the spotlight." I believed her. That changed after Henry Blake joined the company. Henry was young, charming, and always smiling. He constantly called Emily Sister Emily and acted far too close to her. Late at night, he'd post photos on social media sitting on the couch in her office, wearing her coat. His caption read, "She acts tough, but she's actually worried I'll catch a cold working late." Employees flooded the comments. Secretary Henry and President Emily look perfect together. President Emily finally has someone who truly cares about her. The husband in name only should step aside. I quietly took screenshots. That night, when Emily came home, I asked her about the post. She only frowned. "It's just office culture. Stop acting like some jealous amateur." At that moment, I realized there was no point explaining my feelings anymore. Now, standing inside the banquet hall, I heard people laughing before I even walked over. President Emily treats the new secretary so well. She even cut his birthday cake herself. Didn't she say Henry is the person she trusts the most? Even more than the one waiting at home. Henry sat beside Emily with a gentle smile. He wore an elegant white suit. Pinned to his chest was a sapphire brooch. My mother's sapphire brooch. Just yesterday, Emily had asked me to take it to the dry cleaner. Now it was decorating another man's suit. I froze at the entrance, unable to take my eyes off it. Emily noticed me. For a brief second, her expression stiffened before turning cold. "Kane, why are you so late?" I ignored her completely. Walking straight toward Henry, I calmly said, "Take off the brooch." The entire banquet hall fell silent. Henry touched it with an innocent smile. "Mr. Kane, are you talking about this?" Sister Emily lent it to me. I'm giving a speech on her behalf tonight, and she thought my outfit looked too plain. Emily frowned impatiently. "Kane, it's only a brooch. Today is the company's anniversary. Don't make a scene." I stared at her. "Only a brooch?" She sighed. "Your mother left you plenty of things. I'll buy you another one later." The moment those words left her mouth, something inside me finally broke. Henry wasn't finished. Holding his wine glass, he leaned closer, lowering his voice just enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Mr. Kane, don't misunderstand. Sister Emily simply believes valuable things should belong to people who can actually make good use of them." A few guests gasped. I looked directly at him. "Say that again." Henry smiled and leaned close to my ear. "You're nothing but a loser living off a woman. If your mother were still alive, She'd be ashamed to see what you've become. Before he could pull away, I raised my hand. Slap! The sharp sound echoed across the silent ballroom. Henry stumbled backward as his wine glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the floor. The entire banquet hall fell into complete silence. Emily rushed to Henry's side, helping him to his feet. When she looked at me, her eyes were ice cold. "Kane, have you lost your mind?" I met her gaze without flinching. "He insulted my mother." Henry immediately covered his swollen cheek, his eyes filling with tears. "I didn't," he said, his voice shaking. "I was only telling Mr. Kane not to misunderstand my relationship with you." He suddenly attacked me. He played the victim perfectly. His trembling voice, tearful eyes, and the small streak of blood at the corner of his mouth made him look completely innocent. Emily didn't even glance in my direction. "Apologize," she ordered. I looked at Henry. "Tell him to take off the brooch first." Emily's voice turned even colder. "I told you to apologize." Every eye in the banquet hall was fixed on me. Whispers spread through the crowd. How embarrassing. How did President Emily end up marrying someone like him? Secretary Henry handled himself with so much dignity. Hitting someone in public is completely uncivilized. Without saying another word, I opened my phone and backed up the recording to the cloud. Emily saw what I was doing, and her expression darkened. "Are you trying to threaten people with your phone now?" She raised a hand toward the security guards. "Take his phone." 2 guards stepped forward. I didn't resist. Before they could reach me, I calmly placed my phone face down on the table. Then I looked straight at Emily. "I'm warning you just once tonight. If you expect me to apologize, I won't. And if you want to call the police, I won't stop you either." She let out a cold laugh. "Are you threatening me?" I shook my head. "It's not a threat. It's a warning." She stared at me as though she had never truly known me. Just then, Henry gently tugged on her sleeve. "Sis Emily, forget it. Please don't let me ruin your marriage." The more he tried to sound reasonable, the colder Emily became. Without another word, she pulled out her phone and dialed the police. "Someone has intentionally assaulted another person. We're at the Hilton Hotel, top-floor banquet hall." I didn't move. 10 minutes later, the military police arrived. Henry immediately underwent a medical examination, claiming dizziness, facial pain, and ringing in his ears. Emily personally handed the officers a list of witnesses. "I'm willing to cooperate fully with the investigation," she said. "Handle this according to the law." One of the officers turned to me. "Do you have anything to say?" I looked at Emily. She stood firmly beside Henry without the slightest hesitation. "I hit him," I admitted. "I won't deny that, but I also have evidence explaining why." Emily's expression didn't change. "Are you still making excuses?" I smiled faintly. "Emily, remember this. You're the one personally sending me to prison." Her eyes flickered for just a moment before turning cold again. "Kane, adults have to accept the consequences of their actions." I nodded. "Fine." As the officers escorted me away, I walked past Emily. Henry leaned gently against her shoulder and whispered, "Sis Emily, am I making things harder for you?" She softly patted the back of his hand. "It's not your fault." I froze for a brief moment. 3 years earlier, she'd spoken those exact same words to me. Back then, her financing had fallen apart. Investors had humiliated her, and I had drunk in her place until my stomach bled. She sat beside my hospital bed, crying. "Kane, it's not your fault. I'm the useless one." Now those same words, that same kindness, belonged to someone else. The door of the military vehicle slammed shut behind me. Once inside, I quietly pulled out the backup phone that the officers hadn't found. Before getting into the vehicle, I'd hidden it inside the lining of my jacket. Using the few minutes I had, I sent 3 messages. The first went to my lawyer. "Start the divorce proceedings. Revoke every authorization." The second went to Lindsay Walker. "Seal every original technical record from 3 years ago, along with every permission change made after Henry joined the company. The third message went to a number I hadn't contacted in over 10 years. Grandpa, I want to come home. After sending all three, I switched off the phone. Outside the window, the lights of the hotel slowly disappeared into the distance. I never looked back. That slap wasn't only for Henry. It was the slap I needed to finally wake myself up. The night I entered military prison, Emily believed I would eventually lower my head and admit defeat. She had no idea that my final message had already set the entire Williams family in motion. The next morning, the duty officer handed me a stack of paperwork. Kane Miller, 15 days of administrative detention. You may request a review or contact a family member. I picked up the pen. I don't have any family. The officer looked at me in surprise. Isn't your wife outside? I smiled bitterly. She's the one who reported me. The officer fell silent for a moment before sliding the phone toward me. Then call your lawyer. I dialed James Carter. As soon as he answered, I said only one sentence. Proceed as planned. There was a brief silence. Mr. Kane? Are you sure? I'm sure. What about Emily? Carter asked quietly. I stared at the cold white light on the prison wall before answering. From today on, don't leave her any room. Then I ended the call and signed the paperwork. 15 days isn't a long sentence, but it's long enough for the last bit of warmth in someone's heart to disappear. The next morning, Emily came to see me. She sat on the other side of the visitation glass, looking tired and pale. Henry wasn't with her. Instead, the company's PR manager stood behind her, holding a prepared statement. I picked up the phone. The first thing she said was, "Apologize to Henry. If you do, I'll convince him to sign a settlement letter." I looked at her calmly. Did he take off the brooch? Her expression instantly turned cold. Kane, are you seriously still thinking about that? It belonged to my mother. I already told you I'll make it up to you. I pulled the phone slightly away from my ear. Even through the thick glass, her voice sounded sharp and unfamiliar. Do you have any idea what kind of scene you caused at the company celebration? You assaulted my secretary. Foster Group just secured the Henong project. And now people online are talking about nothing except your behavior. Do you know how much damage you've done? I raised the receiver back to my ear. So you came here for the company. Not for me. She gave a cold laugh. You're my husband. You made a mistake, and I'm asking you to take responsibility. Is that unreasonable? I nodded. Not at all. She looked at me expectantly. Then apologize. I won't. Her fingers tightened around the phone. Kane, don't push me. I smiled faintly. Emily, what haven't you already done? For just a second, the color drained from her face. I thought, maybe she would finally ask me how I was doing. Maybe she'd say something as simple as, "Are you all right in here?" But she didn't. Instead, she held a document against the glass. This is a postnuptial property agreement. Sign it. After you're released, move into the villa in the Southern District for a while. Don't attend any company events anymore. I'll make sure Henry doesn't pursue this matter further. I lowered my eyes and read the title. Postnuptial Property Restriction Agreement. The contents were straightforward. If you're enjoying our stories, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us create more amazing content for you. We're on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and every single subscription brings us one step closer. Thank you for being part of our journey. I would admit that I had voluntarily assaulted a company executive. I would pay Henry $500,000 as compensation for emotional distress. I would permanently give up every right and interest connected to Foster Group's projects. I would also agree never to interfere with Emily's work or business decisions again. I couldn't help laughing. Emily frowned. What's so funny? I looked up at her. You finally stopped pretending. Her face darkened. Kane, I'm giving you a way out. I slowly shook my head. That's not a way out. It's a noose. I placed the receiver back on the hook. She kept calling my name from the other side of the glass. I never picked it up again. On the third day, James Carter came to visit. He slid several documents through the opening beneath the glass. Mr. Kane, the first file contains the divorce petition. The second is the notice revoking Foster Group's authorization to use the Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 system. The third is the original recommendation statement for the Henong project. I carefully reviewed every page. When I finished, Carter spoke again. Colonel Williams returned to the country last night. He'll be in the city today. My fingers paused. How is Grandpa? He's doing well, Carter replied. But when he found out you were in prison, he was so angry he couldn't sleep all night. I lowered my eyes. Colonel Williams. My grandfather. He had once commanded the entire military district and remained one of the most respected men in the city even after retirement. 15 years earlier, when my mother left the Williams family to marry my father, Grandpa had called her foolish and dismissed my father as a poor nobody. Before my mother passed away, she made me promise never to hate him. I never did. I simply never went back. Years later, after Emily and I got married, she once asked, "Do you have any family left?" "I have a grandfather," I answered. "What's he do?" "He runs a business." She was busy reviewing a financing proposal and never even looked up. "That's fine, as long as he doesn't cause trouble." After that, I never mentioned him again. Carter lowered his voice. "The colonel said whenever you're ready to leave, he'll personally come and get you." I slowly shook my head. "No hurry." He looked at me in surprise. "You're really planning to serve the entire sentence?" I slid the documents back across the table. "Let Emily believe she's completely crushed me." Understanding flashed across Carter's face. "I understand." Over the next few days, Emily never came back to visit. Henry, however, was busy posting on social media. Henry posted a photo on social media. He was sitting in Emily's office with an oversized bandage wrapped around his face. The caption read, "Getting hurt isn't the scary part. What's scary is when someone uses violence to cover up their own incompetence. Thank you to everyone who has stood by me. And thank you, Sister Emily." The post quickly filled with likes from company employees. One comment read, "Don't be afraid, Henry. President Emily will always protect you." Another said, "At least the troublemaker is finally locked up. The company can finally have some peace." Lindsay Walker took screenshots of the post and sent them to James Carter. Carter printed them out and brought them to me. After reading everything, I simply handed the papers back. "Keep them." On the 7th day, Pingang Group sent Foster Group a supplementary review notice. The reason was simple. There was now a dispute over who actually owned the authorization rights to the core system used in the project. For the first time, Emily panicked. She requested permission to visit me in prison. I refused. On the 10th day, Foster Group's finance department uncovered another shocking truth. The original $50 million bridge loan that had saved the company 3 years earlier hadn't come from Foster Group. It hadn't even come from Emily. The money had been transferred from a personal account under the name Kane Miller. On the 11th day, Emily's father, Richard Foster, came to see me. Compared to his daughter, he was much more composed. "Kane," he began, "we're family. It's not a good look for us to be fighting like this. Emily is still young and impulsive. After you're released, I'll have her apologize to you." I looked at him calmly. "What about Henry?" His expression stiffened. "He's just a secretary. He's not important." I smiled. "If he's not important, then why did your entire family ask me to step aside for him?" Richard Foster had no answer. Silence filled the room. I picked up the phone. "Mr. Foster, go back and tell Emily something for me. I won't sign the supplementary agreement. I won't continue the authorization. And I've already filed for divorce." His eyes widened. "What did you just say?" I quietly placed the receiver back on the hook. He began pounding on the glass, calling my name. I never turned around. On the evening of the 12th day, James Carter visited again. This time he brought me a clean set of clothes. "Colonel Williams is waiting outside." I looked at him in surprise. "There are still 3 days left." Carter nodded. Henry's medical report came back. His injuries don't even qualify as minor injuries. At most, it's an administrative offense. After our legal team submitted the reconsideration request, the authorities approved your early release according to procedure. You can leave now. I remained seated. Carter smiled faintly. The colonel asked me to tell you something. He's not here to rescue you. He's here to take a member of his family home. The words family member made my eyes sting. After changing into clean clothes, I walked outside. A light drizzle was falling. A black military vehicle was parked at the entrance. The rear door slowly opened. Colonel Williams sat inside. His hair had turned much grayer over the years, but the sharpness in his eyes hadn't faded. He looked at me quietly before speaking. You've lost weight. I stood there for a long moment before softly saying, Grandpa. His eyes instantly turned red. He reached out his hand. Come on. Let's go home. Before getting into the car, I turned back for one last look at the prison gates. This place had held me for 12 days. It had also closed the door on my 7-year marriage forever. 3 days later, Emily finally sent old George, our longtime driver, to pick me up. She didn't come herself. Old George walked into the prison registration office with an awkward smile. I'm here under Ms. Emily Foster's instructions to pick up Mr. Kane. The duty officer checked the records before looking up. Kane Miller left 3 days ago. Old George froze. Left? Who picked him up? The officer answered matter-of-factly. Colonel Williams. The keys nearly slipped from old George's hand. Which? Colonel Williams? The officer looked puzzled. Is there another Colonel Williams in this city? Old George's face instantly turned pale. The officer continued. He signed the release as Mr. Miller's family member. Relationship, grandfather. When old George rushed back and reported everything, Emily was in the middle of a meeting. Henry sat on her right, the gauze on his face replaced with an even larger white bandage. At that moment, her secretary was helping prepare the public apology statement she expected me to sign. As soon as old George finished speaking, the pen in Emily's hand snapped in two. The entire conference room fell silent. What did you say? Emily asked slowly. Old George's voice trembled. The prison said, Mr. Kane was released 3 days ago. Emily looked up sharply. Who took him? Old George swallowed hard. Colonel Williams. He signed as Mr. Kane's family member. Relationship. Grandfather. The room became eerily quiet. Someone accidentally dropped a pen onto the conference table. Emily stared at old George. Say that again. He lowered his head. Colonel Williams personally came to pick him up. Henry was the first to laugh. Old George, you must have heard wrong. How could someone like Colonel Williams possibly be Mr. Kane's grandfather? His words immediately gave everyone in the room an excuse to believe it couldn't be true. Someone immediately spoke up. Yeah. Maybe it's just someone with the same name? Another person added. Since when does Kane have a colonel for a grandfather? Wasn't Mr. Kane raised in an ordinary family? Didn't President Emily always say he had no relatives left? Emily's expression remained cold. She picked up her phone and called me. The call wouldn't go through. Without hesitation, she dialed James Carter instead. He answered almost immediately. President Emily. Holding back her frustration, she asked, Where's Kane? Carter's voice remained calm and professional. I'm sorry, President Emily. Mr. Kane isn't available to take your call. Put him on the phone. From now on, Mr. Kane has authorized me to handle his divorce and all matters related to the revocation of his authorizations. If you need anything, you can speak with me. Emily shot to her feet. James Carter. What exactly do you mean by that? Exactly what I said. There was a brief pause before Carter continued. Mr. Kane is with Colonel Williams right now. That's his personal matter. Emily was about to say something else when Henry suddenly held his injured cheek. Sister Emily, don't worry. Maybe Mr. Kane just knows a driver from Colonel Williams' household and is borrowing the Colonel's name to scare you. Emily glanced at him. She didn't argue. Deep down, she wanted to believe that explanation too. She couldn't accept the alternative. She couldn't accept that the husband she had ignored for years, the quiet man she believed had no ambition, was actually connected to Colonel Williams, the most respected retired commander in the city's military circle. Someone the Foster group wasn't even important enough to meet. Emily ended the meeting early. After everyone else left, only Henry remained. She looked at him. Investigate Kane. Henry froze. Sister Emily. Didn't we already investigate him before? His father died young. His mother passed away years ago. He has no background. Emily stared at him. Check again. The smile on Henry's face faded slightly. You don't trust me? Emily rubbed her temples. It's not that I don't trust you. She paused. I don't trust Kane. Her answer reassured Henry. He nodded. All right, I'll look into it. What Emily didn't know was that Henry had already investigated me long before joining Foster Group. According to the report he received, my background was completely ordinary. College graduate. Mother, Catherine Williams, deceased. Father, unknown. No house, no car, no influential relatives. But that report had been altered. Originally, my mother's name was listed as Catherine Williams. Henry had deliberately removed the surname Williams before handing the report to Emily. The first time he saw that name, he immediately thought of Colonel Williams' family. He never dared investigate any further. He was afraid of discovering the truth. Even more, he was afraid Emily would learn he had been lying from the very beginning. That afternoon, Emily drove to the apartment we had shared after getting married. She hadn't been back in 6 months. The door code was still the same. When she opened the door, the apartment was completely silent. Empty. My clothes were gone. The computer from my study had disappeared. Even the black military boots that always sat beside the entrance were no longer there. Standing alone in the living room, Emily suddenly felt like a stranger in her own home. She remembered how, no matter how late she returned from work, there had always been a light on in the kitchen. I would leave a pot of hot soup waiting for her. If she never touched it, I'd quietly throw it away the next morning. Once, she complained, Kane, stop living like some retired soldier. So I stopped making soup. Not long afterward, she complained again. This house doesn't feel warm anymore. No matter what I did, it was never enough. Emily slowly walked into the study. Everything was gone except for a single cardboard box sitting on the desk. A note was taped to the top. Emily Foster's personal belongings. Sorted. She opened the box. Inside were documents, awards, an old scarf, and several sticky notes she had carelessly left behind over the years. Resting on top was our wedding ring. She reached for it. Beneath it lay a notebook. She opened the first page. It was my handwriting. Foster Group's first major contract. Employee payroll short by $780,000. Covered. She turned the page. Emily's stomach acted up again. The doctor said she needs to drink less. Tonight I'll drink 3 rounds in her place. Another page. Hung logistics. General Manager Jiang doesn't trust Foster Group yet. Arrange another meeting tomorrow. I'll personally guarantee the project. She kept turning pages. Then she stopped. Henry's first day at the company. Emily said he reminds her of her younger self. She smiled so easily today. I haven't seen that smile in a long time. Emily's fingers froze. She continued reading, page after page. There were no complaints, no resentment, only quiet records, project problems, client preferences, company crises, reminders about where her father's blood pressure medicine was kept. Notes about the size of the birthday gift for her mother. The first night Henry drove her home late. The second time he stayed overnight at the office. The third time he posted an ambiguous message on social media. Every detail had been written down. Every memory had been quietly recorded. Not to accuse her, just because I remembered them all. I remembered every single date. On the very last page, there was only one sentence. She knows exactly what she's doing. She just believes I'll never leave. Emily's breathing suddenly caught. She snapped the notebook shut as though it had burned her. Just then, her phone rang. It was Henry. Sister Emily, I found something. Mr. Kane is related to Colonel Williams' family, but only distantly. The colonel took him in because of his mother. It's probably just out of respect for her. That doesn't mean the Williams family is actually going to stand behind him. Emily tightened her grip on the phone. Are you sure? Absolutely, Henry replied confidently. Mr. Kane doesn't own any shares in the Williams family businesses, and he doesn't hold any military position. He's just the colonel's grandson. Hearing that, Emily slowly let out the breath she'd been holding. As long as I wasn't the colonel's chosen heir, as long as she hadn't completely misjudged me, there was still time to fix everything. She looked down at the wedding ring lying on the table. Her expression turned cold again. Then let him come back. Tell James Carter I'll ignore his divorce lawsuit, but he has to apologize to Henry in person and sign the renewal agreement. Henry asked quietly, and if he refuses? Emily was silent for several seconds before answering. Freeze every permission he still has at Foster Group. Without Foster Group, he's nothing. At that same moment, I was sitting in the study of Colonel Williams' old estate. For the very last time, I opened Foster Group's back-end management system. A message appeared on the screen. Are you sure you want to revoke Foster Group's commercial authorization for Cloud Warehouse Generation 2? I stared at the prompt. 3 years ago, I had personally opened this door for Emily. 3 years later, I was the one closing it. I clicked confirm. Another message immediately appeared. Authorization successfully revoked. At exactly 11 that night, every test server connected to Foster Group's Henong project suddenly turned red. The company's technical manager rushed into Emily's office. He only managed to say one sentence. President Emily. The original owner has locked the core system. Emily hurried to the technical department. The entire floor was brightly lit. Programmers crowded around their computers, their faces growing paler by the second. Error messages kept flashing across every monitor. Authorization error. Core module unavailable. Commercial deployment permission revoked. Emily threw her handbag onto the nearest desk. Who did this? The technical manager wiped the sweat from his forehead. It wasn't anyone inside the company. The system log shows the original authorizer revoked access using the primary authorization key. Emily frowned. Who is the original authorizer? The manager lowered his voice. Kane Miller. Emily froze. Standing beside her, Henry immediately interrupted. Impossible. How could Mr. Kane possibly have the primary key? Didn't he only help during the early planning stage? The technical manager forced a bitter smile. Secretary Henry. The original architecture, algorithm models, and deployment key registrations for Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 were all created under Mr. Kane's name. Foster Group only owns the commercial usage rights. We never owned the technology itself. Emily's expression completely changed. Why didn't anyone tell me? The manager didn't dare meet her eyes. 3 years ago, when the project officially launched, you personally signed the authorization agreement. Mr. Kane was standing beside you. He explained that, to make fundraising easier, Foster Group would appear as the commercial operator, while the legal ownership documents would remain on file. Emily's lips parted. A memory suddenly came back. It had been raining that night, 3 years earlier. She had been overwhelmed with pressure when an investor suddenly demanded proof of ownership for the technology. She had completely lost her temper. Without saying much, I placed a folder in front of her. Sign this tomorrow. If anyone asks, just tell them Foster Group has long-term commercial authorization. She barely glanced at the papers. If you've already handled it, then it's fine. She trusted me. I handed her a pen. She signed without reading a single page. Then she rushed off to meet another client. She never noticed what was written on the first page. Now, the document she had ignored all those years ago had become the very thing tightening around her throat. Henry still refused to believe it. But the Henong project has already signed its letter of intent. Revoking the authorization now is malicious breach of contract. A calm female voice answered from the doorway. No. Lindsay Walker walked into the room carrying a folder. She had served as Foster Group's legal director and was one of the few people who had stayed with the company since its earliest days. Emily looked at her. "You knew about this too?" Lindsay nodded. "Not only did I know, I warned you." She opened the folder and calmly read aloud. Article 7 of the Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 Authorization Agreement clearly states that if Foster Group infringes upon the original rights holder's reputation, attribution rights, or financial interests, the rights holder has the legal authority to revoke the commercial authorization at any time. Henry's expression immediately darkened. "Mr. Kane is only serving a detention sentence. What does that have to do with the authorization?" Lindsay calmly opened the folder in her hands and laid several printed screenshots on the table. "Secretary Henry, these are screenshots of your social media posts and your messages in the company employee groups." She looked directly at him. "You repeatedly implied that Mr. Kane is incompetent, lives off President Emily, and has violent tendencies. Last night, Foster Group's official account even liked one of those comments." Everyone in the technical department turned to look at Henry. His face tightened. "I was the victim," he argued. "What's wrong with expressing my feelings?" Lindsay answered calmly. "You're free to express your feelings, but you're the president's secretary. Everything you say is naturally seen as representing Foster Group's position." Emily's face grew paler with every word. For the first time, she understood the real problem. This wasn't about me losing my temper. She had personally handed me a legal reason to revoke the company's authorization. She grabbed her phone and tried calling me again. The call still wouldn't connect. Turning to Lindsay, she asked, "Contact James Carter." Lindsay nodded. "I already did. Attorney Carter said Mr. Kane will only communicate in writing from now on." Emily took a deep breath. "What does he want?" Lindsay paused before answering. "First, Foster Group must publicly clarify that Mr. Kane is not unemployed and has never depended on Foster Group for financial support. Second, Henry must publicly apologize and return the sapphire brooch. Third, Foster Group must immediately stop using every derivative module of Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 and renegotiate a new licensing agreement. Fourth," she looked at Emily, "you must cooperate with the divorce proceedings." Silence filled the entire office. No one dared speak. Emily's eyes turned cold. "He's using the project to force me into a divorce." Lindsay met her gaze. "With all due respect, President Emily, you were the one who used the project and his detention to force him to apologize first." The words weren't loud, but they hit Emily harder than any slap. Henry immediately stepped forward. "Director Lindsay, how can you take Mr. Kane's side? Sister Emily is the president of the company." Lindsay looked at him without changing her expression. "I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm defending the contract." Henry couldn't think of another response. Trying to remain calm, Emily turned toward the technical manager. "If we abandon Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 and switch to the backup system, how long will it take?" The manager answered honestly. "At least 6 months. And the Henong project? Pingang Group only gave us a 20-day deployment window." Emily slowly closed her eyes. 20 days. 6 months. The difference wasn't simply time. It was the difference between survival and collapse for Foster Group. Henry lowered his voice. "Sister Emily, Mr. Kane is only trying to scare you. He loves you too much. He would never really let Foster Group fail." Emily said nothing, because she had believed exactly the same thing, that I would never really leave, never really divorce her, never really revoke the authorization, never really force her into a corner. So she kept pushing me, until she finally realized there wasn't a wall behind me. There was only a cliff. The next morning, Foster Group received an official legal notice from James Carter. Its contents were straightforward. The authorization had already been revoked. Any further use of the system would constitute copyright infringement and expose Foster Group to legal liability. At the same time, the divorce petition was officially filed. Emily slammed the lawyer's letter onto the conference table. What exactly does Kane want? Lindsay answered quietly. He wants a clean break. Henry immediately cut in. He's just taking revenge. Emily slowly looked at him. Is there really a difference? Henry froze. Emily stood up. Prepare the car. We're going to Colonel Williams' house. Old George drove them to the estate. As soon as they reached the entrance, the guards stopped the car. Emily rolled down the window. I'm Emily Foster. I'm here to see Kane Miller. The guard nodded politely. Mr. Kane has instructed us that he isn't receiving visitors. Emily's expression stiffened. Never before had she been turned away while trying to see me. Henry, sitting in the passenger seat, spoke softly. Sister Emily, let's go. There's no need to lower yourself like this. Emily ignored him. She got out of the car and walked to the front gate. Then she called James Carter. Tell Kane I'm standing outside. Carter answered calmly. Mr. Kane already knows. Emily frowned. Then why won't he come out? Mr. Kane said that if there's anything to discuss, you may send him an email. Emily's grip tightened around her phone until her knuckles turned white. I'm not here to discuss business. There was a brief pause. Then Carter quietly replied, Mr. Kane asked me to tell you. The only thing left between the two of you is business. Emily's eyes instantly turned red. She slowly looked up at the tightly closed gates of the Williams estate. Inside, on the second floor of the old mansion, I stood by the window watching her. Behind me, Colonel Williams leaned on his cane. You still can't let her go? He asked. I quietly pulled the curtain shut. No. The old man looked at me. Then why were you watching? I answered calmly. Just making sure. I really don't feel anything anymore. My grandfather was quiet for a few seconds. Then he suddenly laughed. Just like your mother. I turned toward him. Without another word, he slid a file across the desk. The Williams family's East District Logistics Center renovation project. I was planning to give Foster Group a chance. Now, the decision is yours. I opened the file. The project was even bigger than the Henong project. I closed the folder and pushed it back. I won't hand it directly to Foster Group. Grandpa looked at me. Then who do you want to give it to? Set up a new company. Rehire the original team. Open the project to public bidding. Foster Group is welcome to bid too. But they'll wait in line like everyone else. Grandpa studied me for a long moment. You're not doing this for revenge. I shook my head. Revenge is beneath me. Then I calmly added, I just want to take back what was always mine. 3 days later, the Williams family officially announced the bidding for the East District Logistics Center renovation project. At the bottom of the technical proposal, only 2 words appeared under technical lead. Kane Miller. The moment the announcement went public, Foster Group was thrown into chaos. No one dared discuss it openly in the company chat, but screenshots spread everywhere. Isn't the technical lead Kane Miller? The same Kane Miller from President Emily's family? Wasn't everyone saying he was unemployed? If an unemployed man can lead a Williams family project, then what does that make the rest of us? Someone jokingly replied, a failure of prenatal education. Henry immediately ordered the administration department to issue a company-wide notice. Employees were strictly forbidden from discussing non-company matters. But the more the company tried to silence everyone, the more nervous people became. The Henong project was still completely stalled. Now the Williams family's newest project had publicly announced my name as its technical lead. Told everyone one thing. Kane Miller had never been useless. Foster Group had simply kept him hidden all these years. Emily stared at the announcement for a long time. Henry stood beside her, his face pale. Sister Emily, this has to be Colonel Williams trying to save face for him. There's no way Kane could manage a project this large. Emily didn't answer. Instead, a memory suddenly surfaced. Back when Foster Group was just starting, the company's entire technical team had spent 3 straight days trying to fix a major system crash. Nothing worked. She had been so frustrated that she started yelling in the office. I walked in carrying a cup of coffee. After looking through the code for barely 10 minutes, I found the problem. She had looked at me in surprise. How do you know so much? I simply smiled. I've done a little of this before. At the time, she thought I was just being modest. Looking back now, that little probably wasn't little at all. Henry became anxious when she remained silent. He lowered his voice. Sister Emily, we can't let him control us like this. Pin Gang Group is already putting pressure on us. If we don't solve this soon, the board will hold you responsible. Emily finally looked at him. Do you have a plan? Henry answered immediately. Yes. We can countersue him for maliciously revoking the authorization and ask the court for a temporary injunction. At the same time, we can leak the story about him assaulting someone and going to jail. If public opinion turns against him, people will support us. Emily frowned. You want to make this even bigger? Henry quickly shook his head. It's not escalating. It's self-defense. His eyes gradually filled with tears again. Sister Emily, he beat me like that, and you've been protecting him this whole time. People online are already saying I deserved it. Emily looked at his face. The bandage was still there. The doctor had clearly said it was only a minor scratch. Yet Henry had kept the bandage on for nearly half a month. She had always thought it showed how badly he had been hurt. But now, for the first time, it seemed strangely exaggerated. A flicker of doubt crossed her mind. Then she quickly pushed it away. After all, 3 years earlier, during that car accident, Henry had pulled her from the wreckage and rushed her to the hospital. She believed she owed him her life, and because of that, she couldn't bring herself to doubt him. Finally, she nodded. Prepare the documents. Henry quietly let out a sigh of relief. That evening, an anonymous article suddenly appeared online. This headline immediately caught everyone's attention. Female CEO's husband brutally beats young secretary at company banquet, gets detained, then uses his colonel grandfather to blackmail the company. The article mixed truth with lies. It claimed I had been Emily's husband for 7 years, that I had been unemployed the entire time, that I had a violent temper, that I attacked Henry out of jealousy because of his successful career during the company anniversary banquet. It also claimed that after my release, I used my connection to Colonel Williams to pressure Foster Group, causing several major projects to come to a standstill. The comments section exploded. A gold digger finally lost it. He beats people and still acts like he's the victim. I actually feel sorry for that female CEO. She works so hard to support the family, only to be dragged down by a useless husband. Henry immediately forwarded the article to Emily. Sister Emily, public opinion is already turning against him. Once we release the photos of my injuries, Kane won't be able to recover from this. Emily looked through the flood of online comments, but instead of satisfaction, she felt strangely empty. She looked up at Henry. Who wrote this article? Henry hesitated. The PR team found someone to write it. Emily's eyes narrowed. Did I approve that? Henry's face immediately turned pale. I was only trying to protect the company. Emily wanted to lose her temper, but Henry lowered his head, his voice trembling. I know you still care about Mr. Kane, but I was the one who got beaten. Now I have to watch him step all over me and the company just to climb higher. Her anger faded once again. She rubbed her forehead and waved him away. Don't let this happen again. Henry lowered his eyes. A faint smile of victory flashed across his face before disappearing. At the same time, at Colonel Williams' old mansion, James Carter placed a printed copy of the online article in front of me. Mr. Kane, should we release a statement immediately? I read the article from beginning to end before calmly putting it aside. Not yet. Carter frowned. You're going to let them control the narrative? I nodded. Henry is making such a big scene because he's afraid people won't notice his performance. Carter looked confused. What do you mean? Without answering, I opened my laptop and pulled up a folder. Inside were backup recordings from the anniversary banquet. These weren't taken from the hotel's surveillance cameras. They came from the tiny recorder hidden inside my tie clip. Before attending the banquet, I had already suspected Henry would provoke me. I just hadn't expected Emily to go as far as she did. The video played. Henry leaned close enough that only I and a few nearby guests could hear him. But the microphone hidden in my tie captured every word perfectly. You're nothing but a loser clinging to old memories. If your mother were still alive and saw you living off a woman, she'd be ashamed of you too. When the recording ended, Carter's face had turned cold. This alone is enough to reverse public opinion. I slowly shook my head. Not yet. Then I opened a second folder. Inside were Henry's hotel records, expense reports, vehicle tracking logs, and overtime applications from the day he joined Foster Group. Again and again, he had booked twin hotel rooms under the excuse of accompanying Emily to meet clients. But many of those client meetings had never existed. Sometimes Emily really was staying at the same hotel. Most of the time, Henry checked in by himself. Afterward, he deliberately posted vague photos and suggestive captions online, making everyone believe he shared an intimate relationship with Emily. He never wanted Emily herself. He wanted the status that came with being close to her. He was using her to climb higher. Carter looked at the files in disbelief. Where did all this come from? I answered quietly. I never investigated before because I still wanted to believe her. I paused. Once I stopped believing, finding the truth became very easy. Then I opened the third folder. This one contained financial records. As the president's secretary, Henry was responsible for handling executive entertainment expenses. Over the past year, he had inflated reimbursements by $376 million. Nearly half of that money had been transferred to a consulting company registered under his cousin's name. Carter slowly let out a breath. That's enough to send him to prison. I closed the folder. One final piece is still missing. What is it? I looked out the window. Emily has to see everything with her own eyes. Carter immediately understood. She might refuse to believe me, but eventually, she wouldn't be able to keep lying to herself. The next morning, Foster Group held an emergency board meeting. Henry submitted a formal countersuit. He accused me of maliciously revoking the authorization and demanded $200 million in compensation. Emily sat at the head of the conference table, her expression cold and unreadable. Lindsay Walker read through the proposal. Then she calmly closed the file. I object. Henry immediately stood up. Director Lindsay, are you defending Kane again? She answered without emotion. I'm preventing this company from destroying itself. Henry slammed his hand onto the table. Kane has already pushed Foster Group into this position. At that moment, the conference room doors swung open. James Carter walked in with two assistants carrying several document boxes. Emily immediately stood up. Who allowed you in? Ignoring her question, Carter placed a thick folder on the conference table. President Emily. Mr. Kane asked me to deliver the first batch of evidence. Henry's face instantly lost its color. What evidence? Carter turned toward him. Evidence proving you're not the victim. You're the one who started all of this. The lights dimmed. The projector came to life. The recording from the anniversary banquet filled the screen. Henry's voice echoed through the silent conference room. If your mother were still alive, she'd be ashamed of you too. The room fell completely silent. Emily's face slowly turned pale. Before the video even finished, Carter opened another folder. Henry Blake abnormal expense claims and fabricated hotel itineraries. As the documents appeared on the screen, Henry's insults continued playing in the background. You're just a loser guarding a few old keepsakes. If your mother saw you living off a woman, she'd be ashamed of you too. Every word landed like a hammer. Emily stood frozen at the head of the table, one hand gripping the edge so tightly her knuckles turned white. I wasn't there. She couldn't look at me. All she could do was stare at the screen. On it, I stood perfectly still, and Henry leaned close to my ear, smiling as he deliberately provoked me. Then I raised my hand, and the slap landed. Before, everyone had only seen that single slap. Now, for the first time, they heard the words that came before it. Old Foster's face turned pale. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances, but no one said a word. Lindsay calmly set down her pen. It's now clear that Mr. Kane's actions were provoked. Some of the information previously released by Foster Group was materially inaccurate. Henry's face instantly lost its color. "This video is edited," he shouted. "Sister Emily, it's fake." James Carter remained calm. "The original recording has already been notarized. If Secretary Henry believes it has been altered, he's welcome to request a forensic examination." Henry's lips trembled. He turned desperately toward Emily. "Sister Emily, you have to believe me. I was frightened at the time. Maybe I said something in anger, but he still had no right to hit me." Emily finally looked at him. Her expression was filled with disappointment, anger, doubt, and a guilt she wasn't ready to admit. After a long silence, she asked quietly, "Why did you insult his mother?" Henry's eyes immediately filled with tears. "I wasn't trying to insult Auntie. I just lost control because Mr. Kane kept targeting me. I know I was wrong." He stood up and bowed deeply toward Emily. "If I've caused trouble for the company, I'll resign." It was a clever move. He didn't apologize to me. He showed weakness only to Emily. For a brief moment, Emily's resolve wavered. But Carter didn't give her time to think. He opened the second folder. "These are Secretary Henry's entertainment expense records for the past 18 months. A total of 482 million yuan was reimbursed. Of that amount, 376 million was transferred to a shell consulting company owned by Secretary Henry's cousin." Henry jerked his head up. "You're lying." Without saying a word, Carter projected the company's registration records onto the screen. "Legal representative, Susan Payne relationship, Henry Blake's cousin." The conference room filled with shocked gasps. Carter continued, "And that's only the beginning. Our second set of evidence shows that Secretary Henry repeatedly used President Emily's travel schedule to fabricate client meetings. He created the appearance that he and President Emily were checking into hotels together. He then repeatedly posted suggestive messages on social media to encourage rumors." The projector switched to another screen. One post read, "Staying up late with someone important tonight." Another said, "She always says I'm troublesome, but she still left a room key for me." A third read, "She says I deserve someone better." Under every post were screenshots of employees teasing them as a couple. The next slide displayed hotel records. Booked by Henry Blake companion, none expense reason. Accompanying President Emily and Mr. Jiang from Henong Group, but another document immediately appeared underneath. Mr. Jiang was out of town that entire day. Emily stared silently at the screen. The color slowly drained from her face. She wasn't foolish. She had simply chosen not to question anything before. Now, with every piece of evidence laid out before her, she finally understood. Those awkward situations, those rumors, those misunderstandings, none of them had happened by accident. Henry had deliberately created them. Step by step, he made the entire company believe he shared a special relationship with Emily. Then he played the innocent victim, while slowly turning me into the jealous, unstable husband in everyone's eyes. Emily finally spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Henry, explain this." Henry instinctively stepped backward. "Those posts were only jokes. The hotel records were accounting mistakes. I'll pay back the money. I never meant any harm." Lindsay answered coldly, 3.76 million yuan isn't something you simply reimburse." Henry's expression completely changed. He looked straight at Emily. The tears were gone. Only resentment remained. "Sister Emily, are you really going to sacrifice me for Kane?" Emily froze. Henry laughed bitterly. "I stayed late with you. I attended business dinners with you. I drank for you. I handled every problem you didn't want to deal with. And what about Kane? Besides pretending to be the perfect husband at home, what has he ever done?" Emily slammed her hand onto the conference table. "Enough. Henry raised his voice too. Do you really think Kane loves you? If he loved you, would he have revoked the authorization? Would he have pushed the company into this crisis? He's just waiting for you to lower your head and beg him. Before Emily could answer, Carter calmly spoke. Before Mr. Kane revoked the authorization, President Emily had already forced him to sign a property waiver agreement while he was in detention. Henry instantly fell silent. Old Foster finally spoke. Enough. He looked directly at Henry. Effective immediately. You're suspended pending an internal investigation. Henry's face turned ghostly white. Mr. Foster. Old Foster didn't even look at him. Security. Escort him out. 2 security guards walked into the conference room. Henry struggled as they grabbed his arms. Sister Emily, you can't do this to me. Have you forgotten who saved your life 3 years ago? If I hadn't pulled you out of that car after the accident, you would have died. Those words instantly changed Emily's expression. She raised her hand. Wait. The guard stopped. Henry immediately clung to that last hope. Sister Emily, you remember, don't you? 3 years ago. If I hadn't dragged you out of that car, where was Kane? He only stepped in afterward to play the hero. Emily closed her eyes. That was the one thing that had always made it impossible for her to let go of Henry. 3 years earlier, on the eve of Foster Group's financing, she had been in a serious car accident on the highway. When she woke up in the hospital, Henry was sitting beside her bed, his clothes covered in blood. He had looked at her and said, President Emily, I was the one who brought you here. From that day on, she gave him opportunities. She trusted him. She overlooked his mistakes. Deep down, she always believed she owed him her life. Carter looked at her and calmly said, Regarding the car accident 3 years ago, Mr. Kane also asked me to deliver a document. Emily's eyes flew open. What document? Carter shook his head. It's not time yet. He packed away his laptop before adding, Mr. Kane said that if President Emily wants to know the truth, she should attend the Hang-On Group contract termination hearing tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Emily's voice became hoarse. Will he be there? Carter nodded. Yes. The next morning, at the Hang-On Group conference hall, Emily arrived with Foster Group's team. I was already seated at the opposite end of the long conference table. It was the first time she had seen me since everything happened. I was dressed in a dark military-style suit with a neatly tied tie. The 12 days I spent in detention hadn't made me look defeated. Instead, they had stripped away every trace of the man who once clung to our marriage. For the first time, I looked like someone she didn't know. Emily stopped at the doorway and quietly called my name. Kane. I looked up. President Emily. Not Emily. Not my wife. Just President Emily. Her face immediately turned pale. Mr. Jiang, the head of Hang-On Group, glanced at both of us before getting straight to business. The authorization dispute remains unresolved, creating significant legal risks for the Hang-On project. Today's meeting has only one purpose. Can Foster Group continue this project? Henry wasn't there. He had already been suspended. Emily sat down and forced herself to remain calm. Foster Group is willing to renegotiate the authorization with Mr. Kane. Mr. Jiang turned to me. Mr. Kane, what's your decision? Without hesitation, I slid a document to the middle of the table. I refuse to renew the authorization. Emily looked at me in shock. Kane. I calmly continued. During this project, Foster Group allowed its management to publicly defame the original rights holder, manipulate public opinion, and pressure me into giving up my legal rights. The foundation of our cooperation no longer exists. Mr. Jiang nodded. In that case, Hang-On Group has no choice but to terminate its partnership with Foster Group. The color instantly drained from Emily's face. The executives behind her immediately panicked. The Hang-On project was Foster Group's biggest contract of the year. Losing it meant collapsing stock prices. Bank pressure. Board investigations. Everything would come crashing down at once. Emily looked at me desperately. Do you really have to do this? I quietly closed the folder. President Emily. Adults must take responsibility for the choices they make. Those were the exact words she had spoken to me at the anniversary banquet. Now, I was simply giving them back. The meeting ended. Hang-On Group officially announced the termination of the partnership on the spot. Emily hurried after me into the hallway. Kane, let's talk. I stopped walking. She rushed over, her eyes already red. I admit I handled the situation with Henry badly. But Foster Group was built by both of us. You can't destroy it like this. I looked directly into her eyes. I'm not destroying Foster Group. She stared at me. Then what are you doing? I'm taking back what's mine. She froze. I took a small box from Carter and handed it to her. She slowly opened it. Inside was the sapphire brooch. Henry had returned it, but the pin was bent, and the gemstone was scratched around the edges. I looked at her one last time. From today on, neither this brooch, nor you, need to appear in my life again. Her hand began to tremble. The box slipped from her fingers and hit the floor. I turned around and walked away. This time, she didn't chase after me, because her phone rang. It was old Foster. As soon as she answered, his anxious voice came through. Emily, the company's stock has hit the daily limit down. The night Foster Group's stock price crashed. Henry disappeared. Lindsay soon discovered that before leaving the company, he had secretly copied the quotation proposal for the Hang-On project. When the news reached Emily, she was still sitting alone in her office. She stayed there until dawn. Her desk was buried beneath documents. The Hang-On project termination notice, the bank's financial risk warning, the board's accountability letter, and the second legal notice I had sent through Carter. She couldn't bring herself to read a single page. One sentence kept echoing in her mind. I'm taking back what's mine. For all those years, she thought what's mine meant our marriage, their family. Only now did she finally understand. That wasn't what I meant at all. I had given Emily far more than she ever realized. Money, technology, connections, my trust, my patience. I gave her so much that, over time, she stopped thinking she needed to thank me at all. At 1 o'clock in the morning, Lindsay knocked on the office door and walked in. President Emily, we still can't find Henry. His office computer has been completely wiped. Emily looked up sharply. What do you mean? Lindsay replied, the IT department managed to recover part of the deleted data. Before he was suspended, Henry copied the Hang-On project quotation, the client analysis report, and the draft proposal for the Williams family's East District Logistics Center project. Emily's expression changed instantly. The Williams family proposal? Lindsay nodded. That draft had been stored in the president's shared drive for years. It was a template Mr. Kane created 3 years ago. Henry downloaded it before he left. Emily immediately stood up. Call the police. Lindsay nodded. The report is already being prepared. But there's something else you need to see. She handed over a tablet. On the screen was an anonymous email. The sender's identity was hidden. The subject line read, Foster Group CEO covers up husband's violence and frames innocent secretary. Attached were several photos of Henry wearing gauze on his face, along with an audio recording. In the recording, Henry sobbed as he spoke. I never wanted to pursue Mr. Kane. President Emily was the one who insisted on having him detained. She was afraid it would affect their relationship with Colonel Williams. After listening to the recording, Emily's fingers slowly turned cold. Henry had begun turning against her. Lindsay spoke quietly. This email has already been sent to several media outlets. By tomorrow morning, it'll probably be everywhere. Emily slowly closed her eyes. At that moment, she finally understood. Henry had never been an innocent victim. He was a snake, and she had welcomed that snake into her life with her own hands. She had trusted him, protected him, and because of him, she had sent me to prison. The next morning, the internet exploded once again. Henry publicly came forward as the victimized secretary. He claimed he had been assaulted by Kane, then abandoned by Foster Group so the company could win favor with Colonel Williams' family. He also hinted that Emily and I had secretly worked together all along. According to him, revoking the authorization had simply been a plan between husband and wife to shift all the blame onto him. Public opinion descended into complete chaos. Foster Group's public relations department was overwhelmed. The board demanded an immediate explanation from Emily. Old Foster called in a rage. "I warned you a long time ago that Henry couldn't stay. You insisted on protecting him because you believed he saved your life. Now look at what he's done. He's turned the entire company into a joke." For the first time, Emily didn't argue. She quietly asked, "Dad, can the hospital records from that car accident 3 years ago still be found?" Old Foster fell silent. "Why are you asking about that now?" Emily looked out the window. "I want to know whether Henry really was the one who saved me." The silence on the other end lasted even longer. Finally, Old Foster spoke in a heavy voice. "Emily, do you understand what it means if it wasn't Henry?" She knew. It meant she had spent 3 years repaying the wrong person, protecting the wrong person, and hurting the one who had stood beside her all along. At the same time, I was attending a meeting at the temporary office for the Williams family's new project. The new team had just been assembled. Among the core technical staff were several familiar faces, people who had once been pushed aside at Foster Group. One of them looked at me and smiled. "Kane, I never thought we'd get to work together again." I smiled back. "This time, we're not building someone else's dream." Halfway through the meeting, Carter walked in carrying a tablet. "Henry's making trouble again." I took the tablet and quietly read the latest news. Someone on the team couldn't help cursing. "That guy has absolutely no shame." I handed the tablet back to Carter. "Let him keep talking." Carter looked at me. "He's dragged Emily into it too." I nodded. "The more desperate he becomes, the more mistakes he'll make." Carter continued, "Emily has started investigating the car accident from 3 years ago." My pen stopped moving. The room fell silent. That accident had always been the deepest wound between Emily and me. 3 years earlier, she was driving to meet an investor when another vehicle crashed into her car near a highway exit. The moment I got the call, I rushed to the scene. Everything was chaos. She was trapped inside the passenger seat. Her face was covered in blood. Without thinking, I smashed the window and pulled her out. Before the ambulance arrived, she gripped my hand tightly, crying in pain. I took off my jacket, placed it behind her back, and pressed down on the wound on her arm to stop the bleeding. The ambulance arrived, and I went with Emily to the hospital. But just as we reached the emergency entrance, I got a phone call. My mother was critically ill. I handed Emily over to the emergency doctor, left my ID and bank card to cover all her expenses, then rushed to another hospital. My mother didn't survive that night. By the time I finished handling everything and returned, Henry was already standing beside Emily's hospital bed, telling everyone he was the one who had saved her. I didn't expose his lie. Emily had only just regained consciousness and was still weak. Besides, Henry really had helped by calling for a nurse after the accident. To me, saving someone was never about expecting gratitude. Later, when Emily kept talking about how Henry had saved her life, I tried to explain what had really happened. But she cut me off. "Kane, I know you don't like Henry, but don't turn a life-saving act into jealousy." The moment she said that, I stopped talking. Looking back now, some silences aren't acts of kindness. They're simply handing a liar the knife he needs. Carter spoke softly. "Should we release the evidence from the car accident now?" I shook my head. "Not yet. What are you waiting for?" I looked out the window. "I'll wait until Emily uncovers half the truth herself. Then I'll let her see the other half." Carter nodded. He understood. The most painful truth isn't the one someone tells you. It's the lie you uncover with your own hands. That afternoon, Emily went back to the hospital where she had been treated after the accident. In the emergency records office, an elderly doctor searched through the old files for quite a while. Finally, he looked up. Miss Foster, this case is pretty old, but we still have the payment records. Emily immediately asked, who brought me to the hospital? The doctor checked the computer. The emergency contact listed here is Kane Miller. Emily's fingers instantly tightened. It wasn't Henry? The doctor frowned. Henry? I don't remember anyone by that name. When the ambulance arrived, the person accompanying you signed as Kane Miller. He also paid your medical expenses with his own bank card. The color slowly drained from Emily's face. She asked again, then, why did Kane leave? The doctor thought for a moment. The emergency room was very busy that day. I remember he received a phone call. His face immediately turned pale. He begged us to do everything we could to save you. Then he left his bank card with us and rushed away. Emily's voice shook. Why did he leave? The doctor looked through the medical notes. It says his mother was critically ill. Those 4 words, mother was critically ill, hit Emily like a hammer. Her legs nearly gave out beneath her. That was the same night my mother died, and when Emily woke up in the hospital, the first thing she asked Henry was it you who saved me? Henry answered without hesitation. Yes, she believed him. For 3 whole years. She spent those 3 years trying to repay a debt she never owed. And because of that lie, she sent me to prison. When Emily walked out of the hospital, the sunlight was almost blinding. She slowly crouched on the front steps. For the first time in years, she completely broke down. She cried like someone who had finally lost control. At that moment, her phone vibrated. It was an email from James Carter. The attachment was titled, Records of the Car Accident 3 Years Ago, and Kane Miller's Payment Receipt. The body of the email contained only one sentence. Ms. Emily, Mr. Kane said he never expected you to repay him. He only hoped you wouldn't repay kindness with cruelty. After reading those words, Emily immediately drove to the Williams family's project headquarters. When she arrived, she stopped outside the conference room. Inside, she heard my voice. Foster Group's bidding qualification will remain valid for now. However, Henry's involvement in leaking confidential information must first undergo a public investigation. Emily stood silently at the doorway. She didn't go in. The conference room was brightly lit. I was sitting at the head of the table, calmly reviewing the bidding rules with my team. My voice was steady, cold, almost completely without emotion. Every company will be evaluated under the same standards. Foster Group may participate, but it must first submit 3 additional documents. First, the current progress of the Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 authorization dispute. Second, the investigation report regarding Henry's information leak. Third, Foster Group's official accountability report concerning its failure to control public opinion during the earlier incidents. Someone quietly whispered, "Isn't this forcing Foster Group to reopen all its old wounds?" I looked up. A wound doesn't heal just because it's covered. If you hide it, it only gets worse. Outside the conference room, Emily's face was completely pale. Old George stood behind her, hardly daring to breathe. After a long moment, she finally pushed the door open. Everyone in the room turned to look at her. I calmly set down my pen. President Emily, is there something you need? Emily looked straight at me. This time, she wasn't acting like the CEO. She wasn't giving orders. In a quiet voice, she said, I found out about the car accident. The room fell silent. I slowly closed the file in front of me. So, her eyes filled with tears. Why didn't you tell me the truth back then? I looked at her. Then I gave a faint, almost amused smile. Didn't I try? She froze. I continued. On the 3rd day after you woke up, I tried to tell you the truth. I was there that night too. But before I could finish, you interrupted me. Kane, you don't have to make up stories just to steal Henry's credit. Emily's face instantly turned pale. She remembered that day clearly. She had just finished eating her porridge in the hospital. I was sitting quietly beside her bed and gently said, Emily, actually, that night, Before I could explain, she cut me off. Kane, I know you don't like Henry, but he saved my life. Don't make things harder than they already are. I sat there in silence for a long time. In the end, I only said one word. Fine. That single word ended every explanation I ever intended to give. Emily's lips trembled. I didn't know. I looked at her calmly. You didn't know because you never wanted to know. She looked as if someone had slapped her. I never raised my voice. Emily, you've always believed you're the smartest person in the company. You always know who's valuable, who should stay, and who should be sacrificed. But the moment Henry shed a few tears, you stopped questioning anything. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Kane, I was wrong. The entire conference room fell silent. I stood up. I've accepted your apology. But it doesn't change what happened. She hurriedly stepped forward. I'll deal with Henry. I'll issue a public statement. I'll withdraw every accusation I ever made against you. I looked at her. That's what you should have done from the beginning. I handed her a document. The bid review is in 3 days. If Foster Group wants to keep its qualification, you'll submit a statement of responsibility yourself. She lowered her eyes to the document. You want me to admit that I misjudged everything, that I protected Henry, that I forced you to give up your rights. Yes, in front of the Williams family and every member of the review committee. I gave a faint, bitter smile. Emily's voice shook. You want me to judge myself? I met her eyes. President Emily, you've spent far too many years letting other people pay the price for your mistakes. She didn't argue, because she knew it was true. 3 days later, the Williams family's bidding review officially began. Every seat reserved for Foster Group was filled. Old Foster attended in person. His expression was grim, but he didn't stop Emily from taking the stage. He knew the company had no other choice. I sat in the center of the review panel. Colonel Williams wasn't there. He had deliberately left the entire project in my hands. He wanted everyone present to understand one thing. I wasn't leading this project because I was his grandson. I was leading it because I had earned it. Emily slowly walked onto the stage. The audience included media representatives, senior members of the Williams family, and Foster Group's board of directors. She opened the folder in front of her, paused for several seconds, then finally spoke. Regarding the recent authorization dispute between Foster Group and Mr. Kane Miller, today, I am speaking on behalf of Foster Group to make a formal statement. Her voice was slightly hoarse. First, Mr. Kane Miller is not unemployed, as the rumors claimed. He is the original designer of Foster Group's core technology architecture, and the original rights holder of the Cloud Warehouse Generation 2 system. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Emily continued. Second, during the company's anniversary celebration, Henry Blake insulted Mr. Kane Miller and his late mother. Mr. Kane's physical response came after clear verbal provocation. Camera flashes lit up the room. Emily's fingers trembled, but she kept reading. Third, certain members of Foster Group failed to verify the facts before allowing false rumors to spread. Those actions seriously damaged Mr. Kane Miller's reputation. As president of Foster Group, I accept full responsibility. She slowly looked up at me. Here, I offer my public apology to Mr. Kane Miller. The entire hall fell silent. Then, Emily bent forward in a deep 90-degree bow. This was the moment Henry had always dreamed of. He had wanted to see me bow my head. Instead, it was Emily who bowed. I remained seated without moving. I didn't tell her I forgave her, because forgiveness isn't part of a business procedure. And one apology could never erase the 12 days I spent in detention. After Emily finished speaking, Lindsay submitted the investigation report on Henry. The report confirmed that Henry had secretly copied confidential documents related to the Williams family project. He had emailed those files from his personal account to a competing company, Xingtong Technology. The consulting firm working on that project belonged to Henry's cousin, Susan Payne. The Williams family's legal team immediately announced that they would file lawsuits against both Henry and the company involved. Foster Group was allowed to remain in the bidding process, but its evaluation score was reduced to the minimum passing level. Old Foster's face looked darker than ever. When the meeting ended, Emily caught up with me outside. "Kane, I've done everything you asked." I nodded. "President Emily, you've cooperated well." Emily had always believed the Foster Group was built through her own hard work, forgetting that it was my money, my technology, and my sacrifices that made her success possible. At my grandfather's mansion, he offered Foster Group another chance by letting me decide who would handle the massive East District Logistics Center project. Instead of giving it to Emily, I chose to create a new company, rebuild my original team, and let everyone compete fairly, including Foster Group. When the Williams family announced the project with my name listed as the technical lead, the entire company was stunned. The same employees who had mocked me as an unemployed husband suddenly realized I had been the real talent behind Foster Group all along. Emily started remembering the early days when I solved major technical problems in minutes, while Henry pushed her to fight back by suing me and manipulating public opinion. Soon, an anonymous article painted me as a violent husband who lived off his wife and used my grandfather's influence to blackmail the company. I refused to respond because I knew Henry's lies would eventually destroy him. I already had recordings proving he insulted my late mother before I slapped him, along with evidence that he had faked business trips, spread rumors to make people believe he and Emily were romantically involved, and secretly embezzled millions through a shell company owned by his cousin. During Foster Group's emergency board meeting, my lawyer exposed everything. The video cleared my name, the financial records exposed Henry's corruption, and the hotel records revealed how he had manipulated Emily and the entire company. Even then, Henry tried to hide behind the excuse that he had saved Emily's life in a car accident 3 years earlier. That was when my lawyer revealed there was another piece of evidence about that accident and invited Emily to the Hungang project hearing. At the hearing, I formally refused to renew Foster Group's authorization, forcing Hungang to cancel its partnership with the company. Emily begged me to reconsider, but I reminded her that adults must accept the consequences of their own choices. Before leaving, I returned my mother's damaged sapphire brooch and made it clear that neither she nor the brooch had any place in my future. As Foster Group stock collapsed, Henry disappeared after stealing confidential company files. Emily slowly realized that everything I had given her, my funding, technology, trust, patience, and unconditional support, had become things she simply took for granted. When Henry turned against her by leaking false stories to the media, she finally understood he had never been an innocent victim but a manipulative liar. Meanwhile, I built my new team under the Williams family project and prepared to expose the biggest lie of all. Emily investigated the old car accident and learned from hospital records that I, not Henry, had rescued her, signed her admission papers, and paid every medical bill before rushing to my dying mother. Henry had simply taken credit after I left. When Emily confronted me, I reminded her that I had tried to tell her the truth years ago, but she chose to believe Henry instead because trusting him had become her habit. To keep Foster Group eligible for the Williams family project, Emily publicly admitted her mistakes before the entire industry. She acknowledged that I was the creator of the company's core technology, admitted Henry had insulted my mother, accepted responsibility for the false rumors that damaged my reputation, and bowed to apologize. I accepted her apology but made it clear that forgiveness was another matter. Henry was later arrested while trying to flee the country with stolen company secrets, and investigators uncovered years of fraud, fake expenses, forged documents, illegal transfers, and recordings proving he had manipulated Emily by constantly reminding her of the fake life-saving debt. During Foster Group's board meeting, I appeared not as Emily's husband but as the company's original investor, technology owner, and creditor. I presented evidence showing that the company's first $50 million bridge loan had come entirely from my personal funds before we were even married. Emily finally realized that the company she believed she had built alone had been standing on my sacrifices from the very beginning, and every truth she ignored had now come back to destroy everything she thought she owned. Emily had always assumed that once we were married, there was no need to keep track of who gave what. But that was never her decision to make alone. At the Foster Group board meeting, I presented 3 final demands. First, I confirmed that the company's original $50 million bridge loan had been my personal investment before our marriage and requested a formal repayment plan. Second, I informed the board that all derivative products built on my cloud warehouse Generation 2 technology had to stop using it immediately or sign new licensing agreements at market rates. The technical team panicked, knowing multiple projects would be affected, but I calmly reminded them that the consequences were the company's responsibility, not mine. Finally, I revealed evidence that the $20 million consulting fee from 3 years earlier had been approved using a forged version of my signature, and requested the company fully cooperate with the police investigation. Emily stared at the document in disbelief, insisting it was my signature, but I explained that Henry had forged it. Lindsay confirmed the evidence pointed to Henry and his cousin, Sue Jen Payne. The entire board erupted. Old Foster angrily demanded to know how such a huge payment had passed financial approval. Lindsay revealed that the approval had gone through Emily's electronic authorization. Emily suddenly remembered the day Henry casually told her I had already reviewed the documents and all she had to do was click approve. Busy speaking with investors, she never even opened the file. Once again, Henry had used my name while she blindly trusted him. Furious, Old Foster demanded to know how many important decisions she had allowed her secretary to control. I simply stood up and said my part was finished. When Old Foster tried to stop me, asking for another chance to talk, I reminded him that I wasn't there to negotiate. I was only there to inform them of my decisions, just as I had tried to do at the anniversary banquet when no one bothered to listen. This time, everyone listened. After the meeting, Foster Group immediately launched an internal investigation. Emily was stripped of part of her authority. Old Foster took over the legal and financial departments. Henry's assets were frozen. His cousin was arrested, and the company's stock crashed again. But the greatest loss wasn't financial. Emily finally realized that the man she had trusted and defended for years had manipulated her, stolen from the company, and used her own hands to destroy everything she cared about. That evening, she waited outside my apartment with the notebook I had left behind. When I arrived, she handed it to me and quietly said I had forgotten it. I refused to take it. She looked heartbroken and said she had finally read everything inside. Every sacrifice I had made, every problem I had solved, every burden I had quietly carried for her. I told her there were still many things she never knew. Fighting back tears, she asked if we could start over, not because of the company or the divorce, but because of us. I shook my head. There was nothing left between us. She insisted she understood her mistakes now, that Henry had deceived her with the car accident, stolen money, and betrayed her trust. She promised to make him pay and make everything right. I looked at her and quietly replied, "You hate Henry because he deceived you, not because of what you did to me." She stood there speechless. I asked her one simple question. If Henry had never stolen money or harmed the company and had only continued insulting me in front of you, would you still believe you were wrong? She couldn't answer because she already knew the truth. She probably would have kept telling me not to make a scene. As I walked past her, she grabbed my sleeve and desperately asked what I wanted her to do. I gently pulled away and gave her my answer. "Sign the divorce papers." Her face lost all color as she whispered, "You really don't want me anymore." I looked at her one last time and said, "Emily, you were the one who stopped wanting me long before I ever stopped wanting you." The next day, the court officially scheduled our first divorce mediation. At the same time, the police opened a criminal investigation into Henry for embezzlement, stealing trade secrets, and forging my signature. Foster Group's internal audit report was also leaked to the media, and public opinion completely turned around. The same people who had mocked me as a man living off his wife were now apologizing. Some admitted they had judged me too quickly, while others praised me for quietly gathering evidence instead of seeking revenge through anger. I read a few comments before putting my phone away. I didn't need validation from strangers. Their support couldn't erase everything I had gone through, but at least the truth was finally coming to light, and those responsible would face the consequences. The night before the mediation, Emily received a letter from Henry in detention. It contained only one sentence. "Do you really think Kane is innocent?" The letter claimed that I had hidden my connection to the Williams family from the very beginning and had only approached Emily to use foster group for my own benefit. Years earlier, she might have believed those accusations, but this time she chose to investigate instead of accusing me. She asked Lindsay to verify everything. Lindsay quickly returned with a copy of my mother's will. There was no inheritance, no secret fortune, and no conspiracy. My mother simply wrote that if I ever wanted to return to the Williams family, my grandfather should welcome me, but if I chose not to, no one should force me. She wrote that I owed nothing to anyone and only needed to live with dignity and be true to myself. As Emily finished reading, tears fell onto the paper. She finally understood that my mother hadn't left me wealth. She had left me freedom. Lindsay also explained that the Williams family had never rejected me. I was the one who chose not to return because after my mother's death, I poured my time, money, and energy into helping Emily build foster group. If I had gone back to my grandfather then, foster group would probably never have existed. Emily suddenly remembered those years when I spent my days helping her meet clients, my nights developing the company's technology, and my early mornings dealing with my mother's funeral arrangements. She had mistaken my sacrifices for a lack of ambition, never realizing I had willingly given up another life because I chose her. On the day of the divorce mediation, gray clouds covered the sky. Emily and I sat across from each other in the courtroom while James Carter remained by my side. She came alone, looking exhausted and emotionally drained. After confirming our identities, the mediator asked whether we both agreed to the divorce. I answered yes without hesitation. Emily remained silent until the mediator asked again. Finally, she quietly said she did not agree. When asked why, she looked at me with tearful eyes and whispered that she still loved me and believed our marriage could be saved. I simply smiled before placing a thick stack of documents on the table. They proved our relationship had completely broken down. The evidence included the police report from the anniversary banquet, records showing she forced me to sign away my rights while I was in detention, screenshots proving she allowed Henry to publicly humiliate and defame me, and documents exposing the truth about the car accident that revealed I, not Henry, had been the one who saved her life. Fifth, the foster group's internal statement accepting responsibility. And finally, the checklist from when I moved out of our marital home. Every page was cold. Cold enough to leave no room for compromise. Emily stared at the documents, her face growing paler with every page she read. She whispered, "Kane, do you really have to do this?" I looked at her. Do what? Turn everything between us into nothing but evidence. I met her eyes. Emily, you're the one who taught me that people who don't keep evidence are the ones who end up being wronged. Tears rolled down her cheeks. The mediator remained silent for a moment before speaking. Ms. Foster, based on the evidence before us, the conflict between the two of you has become extremely serious. If you continue refusing the divorce, the next step will likely be formal litigation. Emily turned to me. If I agree, will you really never see me again? Yes. She let out a quiet laugh, but the tears never stopped. Then why should I agree? I wasn't angry anymore. I was simply exhausted. Because even if you refuse, it won't change the outcome. She froze. Those words sounded exactly like the way she used to speak to me. Cold, decisive, leaving no room for discussion. For the first time, she understood what it felt like to be on the receiving end. The mediation ended without an agreement. As we walked out of the courthouse, Emily hurried after me. Kane! I stopped. She stood a few steps below me, holding a stack of property documents. I'll transfer the South City villa and 2 of my commercial properties to you as compensation. I looked at her calmly. I don't want them. Then, what do you want? I want you to cooperate with the divorce. Her eyes filled with despair. Besides that, nothing? Nothing. She lowered her head, tears splashing onto the papers in her hands. I really believed you would never leave me. I know. She looked up at me. You knew. That's exactly why I'm leaving. She stood there speechless. That same afternoon, the police released an update on Henry's case. Henry was officially placed under compulsory investigation for suspected embezzlement, forgery of signatures, and theft of trade secrets. Su Jianping confessed that Henry had spent 3 years deliberately getting close to Emily. As for the so-called rescue after the car accident, he had simply overheard a nurse calling my name at the hospital and seized the opportunity to claim the credit for himself. He had even kept a recording from that day. In the recording, the nurse asked, "Where's Mr. Kane Miller? Didn't he just pay the hospital bill?" Henry replied, "He had to leave. I'm a friend of Ms. Emily's. I'll take care of everything." With that single sentence, he stole 3 years of truth from me. That evening, Emily locked herself inside her office. She played the recording over and over again. By the end, she smashed her phone against the floor. When old Foster walked in, broken glass covered the room. He looked at his daughter and sighed, his voice sounding older than ever. "Emily, it's too late for regrets now, isn't it?" Emily leaned back in her chair, staring blankly ahead. "Dad, have I always been this stupid?" Old Foster didn't answer immediately. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "You're not stupid. You just trusted your own judgment too much. And you never truly took Kane seriously. That hurt him more than any scolding ever could." Emily slowly closed her eyes. One memory after another flooded back. Me cooking porridge for her before sunrise. Me drinking on her behalf at financing dinners. Me carrying her, covered in blood, after the car accident. Me asking her through the prison glass if she had taken off the sapphire brooch. Back then, she thought I was making a fuss over something insignificant. Only now did she realize that had been my final attempt to get an answer from her. She never gave me one, so I left. At the Colonel's old residence, Grandpa handed me an old photograph. In it, my mother stood smiling at the entrance of the Williams family estate, holding me in her arms. She looked young, beautiful. Grandpa smiled. "If your mother could see you today, she'd be proud." I looked quietly at the photo. No, she'd probably scold me for coming home so late. Grandpa sighed. "I was too stubborn back then." I shook my head. "The past is over. Let it stay there." He looked at me. "What about the Foster family? How do you plan to finish this?" I slipped the photograph back into the album. Divorce, debt collection, and withdrawing the technology authorization. Once those 3 things are finished, Emily and I will have nothing left between us. Grandpa nodded. "Good." I thought that chapter of my life was finally coming to an end. But that night, Carter called. "Mr. Kane, Henry wants to see you." I answered without hesitation. "No." "He says he still has another recording involving Emily. If you refuse to meet him, he'll release it to the media." I looked out into the night. After a few seconds, I answered calmly. "Let him." Carter froze. "You're not worried?" I closed the window. "What do I have to worry about? Whatever happens next is a consequence Emily has to face, not me." The very next day, Henry leaked the recording. But no one expected the most damaging part of it to be something Henry himself had said. "Kane won't give up? No problem. I know exactly how to make sure Emily personally sends him to prison." The recording spread across the business world almost overnight. In it, Henry was talking to Su Jianping. Su asked, "Are you really sure you can get Emily on your side?" Henry laughed confidently. "Absolutely. She hates it whenever Kane uses his status as her husband to question her decisions. All I have to do is act like the victim, and she'll think Kane is just being petty." Sue asked again, "What if Kane doesn't take the bait?" Henry chuckled. "Then I'll insult his mother. He won't be able to hold back." Sue fell silent for 2 seconds. "You're ruthless," Henry replied casually. "If he hits me, I'll have my injuries documented. For the sake of her reputation, and to prove she's not taking sides, Emily will definitely call the police. And if Kane still refuses to give up..." He laughed again. "I have a way to make sure Emily personally sends him to prison." The recording ended there. The internet exploded. Everyone who had defended Henry immediately went silent. The foster group's official account was flooded with criticism until they were forced to disable comments. Emily became the center of public outrage. She personally sent her own husband to prison, only to discover he had been framed from the very beginning. People online didn't hold back. This female CEO has unbelievably poor judgment. Cain is the real victim. The person who was supposed to protect him became the one who hurt him the most. That very night, the foster group's board held an emergency meeting. Emily was suspended from her position as president, and old Mr. Foster stepped back in to take control. Emily didn't argue. She simply sat in the conference room as everyone criticized her. Some accused her of letting emotions cloud her judgment. Others blamed her for poor management. Several directors said the company had nearly been destroyed because of her decisions. She accepted every accusation in silence, because every one of those criticisms. Cain had already tried to tell her himself. She just never listened. 3 days later, the second divorce hearing took place. This time, Emily didn't object. She sat quietly at the defendant's table, wearing a black coat, her face pale and exhausted. The judge asked both parties for their decision. When it was my turn, I answered with only 2 words: divorce. Then it was Emily's turn. She looked at me for a long time. Only after the judge reminded her did she finally whisper, "I agree." The moment those 2 words left her mouth, it was as if all the strength had drained from her body. When it came to dividing the assets, Carter submitted the complete list. The court confirmed that the 50 million yuan I had loaned before our marriage was a legal debt, and Foster Group would repay it in installments. The authorization for the second-generation cloud warehouse system was officially terminated. Any further use by Foster Group would legally constitute copyright infringement. As for our marital assets, I only accepted what I was legally entitled to. Emily offered me additional compensation. I refused. She asked to keep the house we had once shared. I agreed. I had no desire to ever step inside it again. Before ending the hearing, the judge asked if either party had anything else to say. Emily suddenly stood. "I'd like to say something to Cain." The judge looked toward me. I nodded. "Go ahead." She walked over and stopped right in front of me. She was so close I could see the red veins in her tired eyes. "Cain, I'm sorry." I nodded gently. "I heard you." Tears rolled down her face. "I know it's too late to apologize, but I still need to tell you something. It wasn't that I never loved you." I didn't interrupt her. She continued through her tears. "I just got too used to you always being there. I got used to you cleaning up every mess I made. I got used to you never standing up for yourself. I got used to you putting me before everything else. When Henry came into my life, I actually felt relieved. He always agreed with me. But you were always the one reminding me about risks." She lowered her head and cried quietly. "I treated the person who truly cared about me as the one who ruined everything." For the first time, she had finally understood. I looked at her and said quietly, "Emily, I'm glad you finally see it." A flicker of hope appeared in her eyes. But my next sentence extinguished it completely. "But it has nothing to do with me anymore." Her lips trembled. I took the pen from Carter and signed my name on the final settlement agreement. Cain Miller. Every stroke was firm and deliberate. There wasn't a moment of hesitation. Emily watched my signature as though she were watching the last door between us slowly close. Then she picked up the pen and signed her own name. At that moment, our 7-year marriage officially came to an end. As I walked out of the courthouse, a light rain began to fall, just like it had on the day I walked out of prison. The only difference was that back then, my grandfather had been waiting for me. Today, what waited for me was my own future. Emily hurried after me with an umbrella. "Cain, can I have one last hug?" I stopped and looked at her. She stood in the rain, her eyes filled with pleading. 3 years ago, I would have given in. Even a year ago, I probably still would have. But not anymore. It's not appropriate. The hand holding her umbrella slowly dropped to her side, and the rain soaked through her shoulders. I turned and got into the car. Just before the door closed, I heard her call out one last time. "Kane, will you ever think about me again?" I didn't answer. The car pulled away, and through the rearview mirror, her figure grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared. Suddenly, I remembered a night many years earlier. She had just secured her first round of investment. She was drunk, leaning against my shoulder, whispering, "Kane, don't ever leave me." Back then, I smiled and answered, "Okay," and I kept that promise for years, until she pushed me away with her own hands. As the car reached the intersection, I adjusted the rearview mirror and stopped looking back. Henry's case soon entered the prosecution stage. He tried to shift all the blame onto Sue Jianping. But in exchange for a lighter sentence, Sue handed over every chat record. They documented everything. How Henry planned to get close to Emily. How he falsely claimed credit for saving her after the car accident. How he forged my signature to transfer company funds. How he used social media to create misleading rumors. And how he deliberately provoked me into hitting him. The chain of evidence was complete. Henry had nowhere left to hide. While in detention, he requested one final meeting with Emily. Emily agreed, not because she still cared about him, but because she wanted to hear the truth with her own ears. Separated by the glass, Henry looked exhausted and broken. The moment he saw her, he burst into tears. "Sister Emily, I was wrong. I just loved you too much." Emily looked at him without the slightest warmth. "You never loved me. You loved the power I gave you." Henry froze. She continued, "Why did you lie about the car accident?" His eyes darted away. I just... Emily slapped her hand against the glass. "Tell me the truth." Henry flinched. After a long silence, he lowered his head. "Because I saw the watch you were wearing. It was the watch worn by the heir to Foster Group. I knew you came from money." Emily gave a faint, bitter smile. "So from the very beginning, you were after my money." Henry hurried to explain. "But later I really did fall in love with you." Emily stood up. "You disgust me." Henry's face instantly turned pale. "Sister Emily, you can't abandon me. I did everything for you." Emily stopped walking. Without turning around, she said, "Don't ever mention his name again." Then she looked back at Henry. "You're not worthy." For the first time, she had truly chosen my side. But it came far too late. After leaving the detention center, Emily went to my mother's grave. She placed the damaged sapphire brooch in front of the headstone. Then she stood there quietly for a very long time. Finally, she whispered, "Auntie, I'm sorry." The wind drifted gently through the cemetery. No one answered her. Only then did she understand. Some apologies are simply never meant to receive a reply. On the final day of the Williams family's project review, Foster Group lost the bid. Not because I intentionally lowered their score, but because their management problems and technical shortcomings no longer met the project's requirements. The winning contract ultimately went to my newly established company, Yanqing Technology. The Williams family became our first client. Hongong Group became the second. Many of the veteran employees who had once been pushed aside at Foster Group gradually joined us. I never tried to steal them away. I simply offered them a place where they wouldn't have to carry the blame for someone else's mistakes. At the signing ceremony, a reporter asked, "Mr. Kane, after everything that's happened recently, how do you view it all?" I looked straight into the camera. People have to take responsibility for the choices they make, whether it's in marriage or in business. Another reporter asked, "Mr. Kane, have you forgiven Emily?" I smiled. "I don't hate her." The reporter followed up immediately. "Does that mean you've forgiven her?" I shook my head. "No, it simply doesn't matter anymore." After the signing ceremony ended, I received one final email from Emily. The subject line read, "Kane, can I give part of Foster Group back to you?" Emily's email was long. She told me she had stepped down as president of Foster Group. After old Mr. Foster took over the company again, he decided to sell off some assets to repay its debts. She also said the company would repay the $50 million premarital loan, along with all the licensing losses according to our agreement. At the end of the email, she wrote, "Kane, I know you're never coming back, and I know Foster Group no longer deserves to be connected to you, but I still want to transfer the 5% of Foster Group shares under my name to you. It's not compensation, and it's not an attempt to reconcile. I just want to admit one thing. Everything Foster Group achieved was always half because of you." After reading it, I quietly closed the email. Carter looked at me. "Do you want to reply?" I shook my head. "Decline it for me." He didn't seem surprised. "Any reason?" I looked out the window. I've already taken back everything that belongs to me. If she's finally willing to admit the truth, that's her choice. I don't need her shares to prove my worth. Carter nodded. "Understood." I thought that would be the end of everything. But the real ending came much more quietly than I had expected. 6 months later, Henry's case finally came to trial. He was convicted of occupational embezzlement, forgery of signatures, and infringement of trade secrets. With all the charges combined, he received his sentence. Sue Giant Payne was sentenced as well. Henry cried in court, insisting he was young and had only made a momentary mistake. The judge wasn't moved. As the bailiffs escorted him away after the verdict, he spotted me sitting in the gallery. He suddenly struggled and shouted, "Kane, you won. Are you satisfied now?" I slowly stood up and looked at him. "It's not that I won." He froze. "It's that you finally lost." His face twisted with anger before the bailiffs dragged him away. I never looked back. Emily was there too. She sat quietly in the last row wearing a mask. After the hearing ended, she walked over to me. 6 months had changed her. Her hair was short now. She wore a simple coat, and the sharp confidence that once filled her eyes was gone. "Kane." I nodded. "Emily." Hearing me call her by name made her eyes flicker with pain, but unlike before, she didn't ask me to call her anything else. She gave a small smile. "I didn't come today to see you. I just wanted to watch him face the consequences." I nodded. She continued, "Foster Group has stabilized. It's nowhere near what it used to be, but it'll survive." "That's good." She looked at me quietly. "I'm planning to leave the city for a while. I'll transfer to the southern branch and start over from the bottom." That surprised me. She had once cared more than anything about her position, the CEO's office, the boardroom, and being the one everyone looked up to. Now she was willing to let all of that go. That meant she had truly changed. I simply said, "Good luck." Her eyes reddened slightly. "Thank you." We walked out of the courthouse together. Outside, the sunlight was warm. She stopped on the steps. "Kane, I used to think you weren't passionate enough. I thought you didn't express yourself enough and didn't understand my career." She smiled bitterly. Later, I realized that what truly supports a person was never loud words or dramatic gestures. I stayed silent. She took a deep breath. "Don't worry. I won't bother you anymore." I looked at her. "Okay." She smiled again. "Not even a polite word?" I answered calmly. "There's no need." She nodded. "You're right. There's no need." Then she turned around and walked away. This time she didn't look back. Neither did I. My car was waiting by the roadside. Old George stood beside it. He no longer worked for the Foster family. After the Williams family project officially began, he came to me looking for a new job. When I asked him why, he smiled. "Mr. Kane, I drove for the Foster family for 10 years. I've seen plenty of kindness and cruelty. I used to think you were just too quiet. Now I realize quiet people aren't weak. They simply don't like making life difficult for others." I put him in charge of the executive vehicle team, and he had done an excellent job. Old George opened the car door for me. "Mr. Kane, the Colonel is waiting for you at the old house for dinner." I got into the car. "What's the occasion?" Old George smiled. "The Colonel said today is the day you officially move your household registration back to the Williams family." I paused. 6 months earlier, My grandfather had asked whether I wanted to transfer my household registration back to the Williams family. I never answered, not because I didn't want to, but because I felt I was long past the age of needing a family name to prove who I was. Later, I finally understood. Going home was never about borrowing the Williams family's status or prestige. It was about giving my mother peace of mind. When the car pulled into the Williams family estate, a single lantern hung by the front gate. It wasn't grand or extravagant. It simply cast a warm, welcoming light. My grandfather was waiting for me under the porch. Beside him stood an old wooden table with my mother's photograph resting on it. In front of the picture was a sapphire brooch. It wasn't the one Emily had returned. I never accepted that one. My grandfather had found an old craftsman who recreated it from an old photograph. He smiled gently. Your mother's brooch suffered enough. It's carried too many painful memories. There's no need to keep it. This new one is for you, so you'll always remember her. I picked it up. The sapphire shimmered like a clear sky after the rain. Then my grandfather handed me a household registration document. Sign it. I took the pen and wrote my name. Kane Miller, grandson of the Williams family, founder of Yentech, and, most importantly, myself. After I signed, my grandfather looked at me and asked, "Do you remember the day you got out of prison?" I nodded. Of course. That day, the duty officer had said, "Colonel Williams, you're here as Mr. Kane Miller's family to pick him up." Those words eventually reached Emily, and they became the beginning of her first breakdown. But for me, that day wasn't the beginning of my revenge. It was the day I was finally acknowledged. I wasn't anyone's attachment anymore. I wasn't Emily's husband. I wasn't the invisible force behind foster group. I wasn't the useless man Henry claimed I was. I was Kane Miller, a man who finally had a family waiting to bring him home for dinner. My grandfather personally served me a bowl of soup. He was getting old, and his hands trembled slightly. I quickly took the bowl from him. "Let me do it. You sit." I smiled. "Grandpa, I'm not a kid anymore." He snorted. "You'll always be one to me." That simple sentence tightened my throat. After dinner, I stepped into the yard by myself. My phone buzzed with a message from an unfamiliar number. It read, "Kane, I saw you at the courthouse today. You're doing well, and that gives me peace of mind. I won't bother you anymore." It was from Emily. I read it once, then deleted it. I didn't block her. I didn't reply. Sometimes silence is the clearest answer. The evening breeze drifted through the yard. I suddenly remembered 7 years earlier, when Emily stood in that tiny, run-down office and smiled at me. "Kane, once I succeed, I'll make sure everyone recognizes you." She never kept that promise. But it didn't matter anymore. I fulfilled it myself. A year later, Yentech officially went public. That day, my grandfather opened a bottle of wine at the old Williams residence. The media turned my story into a legend. The long-suffering husband, the dramatic comeback, the forgotten grandson who reclaimed everything. Reading those headlines, I felt nothing. Real life isn't made of dramatic headlines. It's much simpler. One day, you finally understand that your dignity can't depend on someone else's approval. Your worth should never be measured through another person's eyes. And love should never become an excuse for someone to cross your boundaries over and over again. On the day of Yentech's bell-ringing ceremony, the venue was packed. Colonel Williams sat in the front row. Lindsay attended as a representative of our business partners. Old George stood proudly among the employees in his brand-new suit, smiling like a child. When the time came, I lifted the hammer and rang the bell. Thunderous applause echoed through the hall. I didn't think about Emily. I didn't think about Henry. The only thing that crossed my mind was that prison gate. It had locked me inside for 12 days. But it had also opened the door that finally let me walk away from a 7-year marriage. After the ceremony, a reporter approached me. "Mr. Kane, who would you like to thank the most for your journey?" I looked straight into the camera. "I want to thank myself for never lowering my head during the hardest days of my life." For a brief moment, the entire venue fell silent. Then the applause became even louder. As I stepped off the stage, my grandfather handed me a glass of warm water. "Your mother would be proud of you." I accepted it with a smile. "I know." Outside, the sunlight was bright. Standing among the crowd, I realized that, for the first time in a very long while, I didn't feel alone. I used to believe family status was something other people gave you. Later, I learned that family can be many things. It can be the people connected to you by blood, can be the people who truly love you, or it can simply be the version of yourself that finds the strength to stand up again after falling. Emily thought sending me to prison for 12 days would break my spirit. She never realized what I truly lost there. It wasn't my temper. It was the very last piece of hope I still had for her. From that day on, I stopped explaining myself. I stopped looking back. And I stopped waiting for anyone else to tell me that I was enough.